to introduce to you Miss Susie Walters and Mr. Mike Junko. Miss Walters is in her 20th year as a member of the Social Studies Department at Mount Lebanon High School. She currently teaches AP European History to seniors and the History of Western Cultures to freshmen. She has taught European history throughout her career of 23 years at both Mount Lebanon as well as Scarsdale High School in New York, where she taught previous before moving to the region. Ms. Walters received her BA in History from Boston College and her Master's in Education from Stanford University. Along with Ms. Walters is Mr. Junko, and he has been teaching at Mount Lebanon since 2006, teaching the History of Western Cultures course alongside Susie for the past 10 years. Mr. Junko also serves as the current Social Studies Department Head at Mount Lebanon, overseeing all secondary schools. So thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you guys so much. It is really an honor for us to be here today. And most of the presentation Susie's going to take us through, but I wanted to kick it off telling you a little bit about our school. Mount Lebanon is in the South Hills. Mount Lebanon High School. We have about 1,700 students that go to school here, and this school is quite an amazing place. We do quite well in our test scores. We're usually in the top 5, and we do all these wonderful things in terms of doing quite well when graded by outside entities. What I really think makes this place so special is the people. And my own personal experience when I came to Mount Lebanon in 2006, I had a political science background, and I was given this course, History of Western Cultures, to teach alongside Susie. And quite frankly, when I found out that we were going to be teaching some of the units, the Renaissance and so forth, it was quite intimidating. And one of the things that I did early on is I went to my fellow teacher and I said, I need help. And Susie was a wonderful mentor for me to bring, in so many ways, the art alive. And I actually, for quite some time, audited the class. I was in the room with the other students watching her bring these paintings alive. And really from that day forward, it made it in my own classroom that I looked forward to that unit more than any other. And she and I were talking the other day, and we started talking about how it's not just the Renaissance unit, but we use art almost every day in our classroom with our course. And we don't necessarily, we're not always aware of it, but the images that we're putting in front of the kids and the skills that we're teaching them early on, the artwork is prevalent. So one of the great things we have here is the way our teachers collaborate. And Susie has been someone that has helped me a great deal. And she's going to tell you about some of what she does in her classroom. I wish that you could be in her classroom and see her do it with the kids, because she's truly amazing in that regard. So I'm gonna pass it on to Susie and let her take it from here.
That's kind words from Mike. So thanks, Mike. I'm going to share with you guys the presentation that I use with my students. And this is a PowerPoint that I use to teach the Renaissance. And it is, I think, very important that students learn how to approach art, because I don't think they've had any experience really looking at art from a technical perspective. So I'm going to have Mike run the PowerPoint. The first thing that I really do is show them an example of medieval art. They start to look at color and line. A lot of what Dr. McCloskey was saying is something I try to do with them, just to train their eye a little bit and get their impressions. And the things that they notice from this would be the gold tones in the background, would be the odd proportions of the primary figures of the Virgin, and particularly they focus in on the odd proportions of the baby, of the infant. And then I just use that to give them a general sense so they can understand change, kind of what Aaron was discussing about continuity and change. And then I jump right into the Renaissance by looking at techniques. So Mike, you can move ahead. And this is one of my favorite paintings to use in order to really dive into some of the new skills used in the Renaissance. This is Diego Velázquez's Las Meninas. And I want to, Mike, you want to jump ahead to the web gallery of art. So one of the things that I would show you guys, anybody watching this that has an interest in teaching art, is that it's very important to choose your sources well. And one of the best sources out there is the Web Gallery of Art. And this houses, it's like a clearinghouse for art of all kinds of genres up until about the middle of the 19th century. So what Mike is doing right now is typing in the name Velázquez into the search bar, and he's going to look up Las Meninas. I'm going to show you how to manipulate the painting a little bit to demonstrate some of the skills that are that we want our kids to acquire. So you come to this, there are lots of details of it. I'm going to show you guys a full version of it and full screen this for you so you can see how to use the tool. So in this image, I ask the kids what they see, and the first thing that they notice are the objects in the foreground, and they focus very much on what Velázquez wants you to focus on, which is La Infanta here, who is the princess in Spain. And he is painting the portrait of the princess at the commission of the king and queen of Spain. Rather than show you the portrait, though, Velázquez has chosen to depict the scene in which he is trying to capture the portrait. And foreground, we're able to describe what's in there, and then I use it also to demonstrate background. And this is where I think the painting really comes to life, and you kind of really get to appreciate all of the changes in Renaissance art. So I'm going to use over here, if you look at the top of the search bar, you can zoom in on this painting. And I'm going to go zoom in pretty significantly, 150%, and scroll down. So when we look at the background, the kids focus in on this one particular image hanging on the back of the artist's studio, which is brighter than the rest. And what they are able to figure out usually is this is not a painting, but rather a mirror. And these are some of the really intricate things that Renaissance artists are able to incorporate into their works you don't really see in the medieval period. There's a lot more, there's money afforded to these artists, their skills are developed from a young age. And in this one, they get to understand that the king and the queen are standing in the room while this is being painted, and those are the images caught in the mirror. So as you observe the painting, if you were in the museum looking at it, you would be standing where the king and the queen are. And it's just incredible to see the kids come to life when they observe this. But when you're using a regular slide, like I had on the PowerPoint originally, I'll show you, you cannot interact with it like you can on the Web Gallery of Art. So that would be one of my biggest sort of tips to teachers who are trying to approach art, is find a way to capture these images so that you can interact with it. So if you want to move forward, Mike. Okay, so the Mona Lisa is another great example of where you can really get lost if you use a fuzzy image like this one that comes from a textbook. So I'm going to go over here back to the Web Gallery of Art, and we will look for Da Vinci. I just want to alert you to one thing, however. Sometimes when you're using this, you need to use the Italian spelling, not for Da Vinci, but for Raphael, you would have to. So as we search this, there we go. Okay, so the great thing about this particular feature, so one of the techniques that I want kids to understand is this technique called sfumato. When you are able to really zoom in on it, sfumato is this technique, for those of you who don't study Renaissance art, where it has a soft, hazy appearance to it. But Da Vinci, through his brilliant talent, is able to do that hazy effect. Oh, where did it go? Hang on.
That's the last painting.
I know. There she is. Let me go back to her. And yet maintain this unbelievable, impeccable level of detail. So one of the things that I always focus in on kids is to look at the top of the bodice of the dress, and how is Da Vinci able to make the painting appear hazy and yet have this incredible embroidery at the top of her dress, or the tendrils of her hair, or the unbelievable sheer veil that she has over her head. And just by being able to go into that level of detail with kids gives them an appreciation for art that I hope they appreciate, a level of appreciation they didn't have before they came in. And plus, these skills to be able to see art, which is what Dr. McCloskey was talking about, in a meaningful way. So if you keep going forward. I'm going to flash forward to Michelangelo's very famous sculpture of David. Most students are familiar with this through actually SpongeBob, which is funny because it appears there. Oh wait, actually stay here, Mike.
All right.
This is a great example of how you can carefully choose works of art. This is a Botticelli. Botticelli was a genius master capable of achieving all of the skills of perspective and but here I chose this one because I wanted to demonstrate chiaroscuro, which is this technique of using light and dark, careful attention to shading. And the perspective in this painting is a little bit muddled because there is the whole idea of scientific perspective is not being employed fully here. The one part of the painting that the kids will gravitate towards, which is what I want them to see, is her face and how impeccably painted it is, and just how realistic she looks, and how subtle their awareness of the light source is, how it's coming from the top left and focusing on her face, creating just a gentle shadow on the left side of her face. And those kinds of, you're able to focus in on that particular feature because of perhaps some of the technical issues with this particular painting, with the skills that they've already learned. So now if we can find Michelangelo's David. I go through this much slower with kids, but you don't need me to teach you Renaissance art. You want me to show you how I used it. Okay, so here is the full view of David, and that's very useful, but I think it's helpful, and I want to demonstrate the contrapposto pose here. We talk about how this hadn't been achieved since classical antiquity, and how the balance is really remarkable. He's 14 feet tall and yet does not somehow tip over, how the weight is really resting all on this leg. But what I want the kids to really look at is in the details. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that I think focusing in on this particular hand gives them a whole new level of appreciation for his prowess in sculpting. That when I ask them what medium this really looks like when you focus in, and they'll often say ivory soap or some kind of soft, pliable material. And we talk about what marble feels like and how hard it is and cold it is. And then what tools did he use to create this incredibly perfect image anatomically of a human hand, and rich with the vascular structure and all of the knuckles and the detail. And that this is, I keep reminding them, this is marble. And then we look over here to his torso and just the perfection of this particular work. And then scaling back and looking at a photograph of, this is in the Accademia in Florence. The scale is just so dramatic. And the goofy guy over here gives you a sense of just the brilliant achievement of Michelangelo's David, and how it becomes a model for sculptors really all the way through to the modern period. If you want to go forward a little bit. Contrast it to another sculpture by Michelangelo, and the kids now have a new level of analysis that they can use, which is what is the difference between subject and theme. And obviously the subject here is deeply religious. A lot of the students will recognize that this is Mary and Jesus after he has been removed from the cross following the crucifixion. But then I'll ask them, do you need to be Christian to appreciate this work? And they almost always will tell you no, because the theme is deeply human, that the themes here are about familial love, and particularly loss, and the mourning that a mom experiences the death of her child. And then I'll ask them, how can you tell that that body is no longer living? And they will notice the awkward positioning of his shoulder and how he appears to be heavier than the rest of the marble. And so here I wanted to show them, and they see this right away, that the impressions her fingers make against the fabric make it look like his body is difficult for her to hold. And then we look, of course, at the incredible detail in the folds and the realism there. It looks like you could take the fabric off and fold it and put it in your closet. So these are the types of things that we do, and this is all at the beginning of the course. And so in order to go, this detail allows us to use art through the rest of the course, like Mike was saying. I want to get out of the PowerPoint, that's great. No longer full screen. Let me get out of here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to come back to you guys now. So as we move through, for example, Mike and I were talking about where else we use art in the course, and we use it a ton. In the French Revolution, we focus so much on the work of Jacques-Louis David. We look at the tennis court oath, and I just put it on the screen and don't say a word and ask the kids to describe it. And some of the coolest responses are, "This is a loud painting. It sounds loud," which is an amazing way to describe a work of visual art because it is so frenetic if you know that painting. And ironically, that's not on the web gallery of art, and I'm not certain why it isn't there, but it's not. I have an image and I put it up there, and we describe who do they see, and they'll notice that it's not all members of the third estate. They'll see members of the second estate, and they'll see a priest in there who is a member of the first estate, and why did they join? And we get this incredible conversation about the complexity of the start of the French Revolution. And then we'll look at his painting of the death of Marat, and we're able to compare it to, the La Pietà, and look at how the imagery is really very Christian and make Marat look like the true martyr of the revolution, almost Christ-like. And it's just, these are ninth graders that are having these conversations, not AP kids. And we'll move through. I cover Guernica when we do World War II as well. But it's just exciting to see kids get engaged in history through art, through these skills that they're acquiring. And if Mike has anything to add, I think that's pretty much it. Oh, as far as sources to use, I would echo what Dr. McCloskey said. Go to the standbys, like Jansen, The History of Art, the giant tome that you see whenever you take a survey art history course. Start there. That's a good place.
So I'm going to open it up again to the audience for questions, but I guess my one question kind of, Susie, you just kind of answered it, but what research went into preparing this lesson? So, is this a professional development course that you took to kind of help you learn some of these things? Was it your own coursework throughout your studies? Kind of how?
I have a bit of an unfair advantage because for the first 2.5 years of college, I was an art history major. And only when I had to take a practical arts class as part of my major did I realize that I have zero talent in the field of art, and it scared me. And I realized I'm probably better suited in the history part of that. So I have a lot of background in art history, and I love it, and I feel passionate about it. So for me, it's not so big of a leap. And I use it even more extensively in my AP European history class too. And, my dream of dreams would be to have a humanities course here that I could teach. But so for me, it's a little bit of an unfair advantage. But I would say, just like Mike did, use resources within your building. I'm sure most schools have a fine arts department with experts who can help you identify what those works are. Because you don't want to spin your wheels trying to find works and then devote too much time to that. You want to focus on picking a few substantive works and the right mediums to show them to the kids, and that's where you should build your lessons.
And Mike, a question for you. What beginner's tips do you have for teachers who are considering infusing European art into their curriculum?
Yes, and I didn't have Susie's background, and so I come from a political science background, and so it was a big adjustment for me. But I will, from time to time, share things with Susie that I find online. Khan Academy, our kids use from time to time to go and search for how to do a math equation. Well, now you can do the same thing for art. I will sit and listen to Khan Academy, go to the different museums and talk about the artwork. And a lot of that I've infused into my own classroom. School of Athens, Raphael. I bring a lot of what I've learned at Khan Academy into my classroom and share it with my kids. So certainly now there's a lot more available out there than when I first began. And so new teachers now certainly have a bit of an advantage as far as that goes.
Any other questions?
Well, again, the thing that I really love is that you also, Susie, in your dealing with the students, get to think about materials. What is marble like? And I think that's a whole other facet. What does it mean to paint on panel as opposed to paint on canvas? That sort of thing. So I think you could even imagine sort of branching out into looking at issues in chemistry and all that kind of stuff just by addressing the materials that artists are using.
One of the
How it is.
scariest, one of the scariest questions to ask in class for me is, like Susie talked about, putting the work up there and saying, "What do you see?" Because you never know what they're going to say. But I find that when you ask that question, it is a scary moment, but that's when some of the best discussion comes to your classroom. And so you have to be willing to have that moment. And sometimes that picture in the textbook is just not good enough. You really want to know, what do you see? And that launches the discussion. And it could be for, hey, we're looking at the work itself, or we're trying to learn something else historically about that era in history. So that question sometimes can take you on a 47-minute journey with the kids that you don't know exactly where it's going to go, because you don't know what they'll say. And they come up with stuff that's new all the time in class. So it's definitely a part of it.
Well, I have the same experience at the graduate level. I mean, I'll just put something up, or I'll take them over to the museum and I'll say, "Tell me what you see," and the thing that I very frequently impress on them is that I learn from them. It's not just a one-way street. Looking at things is a kind of collective enterprise. We all see different things, and we can kind of come together and learn things from each other. So sometimes I'll do that with students. I'll say, I want to learn from you, and I do learn from you. And when they tell me something that I never thought about, I say, that's really interesting. I never thought about that before. And that kind of gets them even more, they can get one over on the teacher, It's like, but it makes it so much more fun. I mean, that's why I like to do that, because I actually do learn from the students and what they're seeing and how they're seeing it. So I'm with you on that.
And just to wrap some things up here, my colleague Veronica, who works with the Global Studies Center, has shared some different books that actually can be used at lower levels. So I'll put those on my resource list that I'm going to share with all of our participants today, as well as our presenters. But there's one, Paris in the Spring with Picasso. This is Rome, which kind of looks at the city of Rome and talks about places in architecture. So these are things that you can use at the lower levels as well. I also have some technology resources, a website called History Pin, where community members actually post pictures from their local community, and Collage Maker I often use as kind of a formative assessment tool or as a review tool. So if I was teaching medieval architecture and I said, okay, now find some images that represent the major characteristics, having them kind of create a collage and share that information and summarize and explain. But I'll share all those resources with you following today's program. But I just want to thank you all so much for joining us today. Susie, Mike, Aaron, and Dr. McCloskey, please, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and effort for sharing these presentations with us.